Right, welcome along. Today we are talking about weight gain for the topic of the month, and I'm talking to Carys Puleston, who I will let introduce herself.
Good morning. I work as a psychotherapist. I work mainly with clients who have issues with food and body image of varying type. And I've also recently trained as a facilitator for an organisation called Beyond Chocolate, which is a no-diet organisation.
Cool. So starting at the beginning, obviously, as women enter perimenopause, a lot of women find that their body shape just changes beyond recognition. They start to gain weight around their tummy. The eating regime they might have always been comfortable with until this point suddenly doesn't seem to quite sit right. Maybe they start getting tummy issues. I find from observing, as I do, that a lot of women suddenly get caught up in quite a strong need to lose this weight, which can obviously lead to quite a negative cycle. And I know obviously this is an area that you're very, very hot on. So what would you advise to somebody who has found that they've just changed shape, maybe gained weight, maybe the scales are starting to be their enemy? What would you advise to help them just start to accept who they are now, start to move forwards with it, rather than really focusing on this weight gain?
I think there's quite a sort of moral overtone in society for women in particular, but increasingly for men as well, that we somehow have to control our weight, and it's a sign of being in charge of your life to not be over a weight that you're comfortable with. I think there's one thing, if let's say you go on an all-you-can-eat cruise and you come back and you weigh a few pounds more, well, you can understand that. But to actually be in a situation like many women are at menopause and perimenopause, where suddenly their shape changes when they've done nothing differently, that can be quite frightening and quite scary because it feels out of control. And the fact is, to some extent, the whole idea that we can control our weight and shape to the nth degree isn't actually true. Different genetically, we're all different in terms of just our lifestyle, our body shape, everything. So we're never going to be. We can imagine that we want to be a certain shape and size, but the control we have over it isn't as great as we are led to believe. Around perimenopause, issues with hormones and things like that can make a big difference, which is beyond control. For example, low estrogen, that affects leptin and neuropeptide Y, which control your fullness and your appetite. So women are naturally led to eat a little bit more. And also, how we store fat. As you just said, our shape changes. So when you're in your sort of fertile years, it tends to be around hips and thighs a bit more, and then perimenopause and menopause with low estrogen, that's more sort of around the tummy and visceral fat, and that's just where we are in life. It's not to say that we can't do anything about it, but having it as a focus, it's sort of fighting against something that you really have no absolute control over. So fighting against our body is not a happy way to be, and does tend to lead us into a cycle, as you said.
Yeah. Can you just quickly, just for people watching who may not particularly be up on leptin and ghrelin and how those hormones work, can you just give us a quick overview?
Well, basically, leptin and ghrelin, neuropeptide Y, these are all hormones which initiate the desire to eat and also off that desire. And I think that this is important for physical hunger, but for a lot of women, I think, going through perimenopause and menopause, they're dealing with lots of different symptoms, periods all over the place, they're facing all sorts of different emotional effects. And so emotional eating is also a big part of that. And that's the part that women can work on. And it's working on our relationship with food and our relationship with our bodies. That's the key, in my view.
What would you encourage to a woman who is finding that she's not happy in the body that she finds herself in? Where would you start helping somebody to unravel that?
Okay, I think there's been a sort of lot of, it tends to be sort of movement, healthy eating, clean eating one side, diet mentality that side, and then you've got the body positivity movement over here. And so what I would actually suggest is a neutral middle ground. So body neutrality, if you like. It's really hard to hate ourselves into change and bully ourselves into change. it's better. You don't have to love yourself either. You don't have to lie, look in the mirror and go, I'm really hot stuff. You know, that's unrealistic for most of us. And so I think it's more about coming alongside yourself, being your own best friend, working with where you are now and what's helpful now for you as a whole person.
So would that be things like, for example, focusing on what your body can do right now, rather than, oh, I've got this new bit of fat here and therefore I hate, and just focusing on the bad bit, as it were. So focusing on, actually, this vessel that I find myself in can walk X number of miles and has, I mean, not in my case, but for many people, has borne children and so on. And those are all really positive things, aren't they?
And that is definitely one side of it. What we encourage in terms of my Beyond Chocolate work, which I use with many of my clients anyway, is actually we tend to outsource our choices, our food choices, to other sort of plans, or sort of diet plans, or to calorie counting, or whatever it might be, rather than actually coming back to ourselves and saying what's right for my body, because we're all individual. And so we would encourage people to learn how to tune in, to reconnect with what their body needs.
Do you want to just give us a bit of an overview about Beyond Chocolate? Because obviously it's not something that everybody has come across. A lot of people have come across all the headline diet types, and, you know, every week there seems to be a new one that is gaining followers, but I'm not sure that many people globally are as aware of Beyond Chocolate as maybe would be helpful for people.
Okay. Well, I think the first thing is it's with diets and with a lot of health plans, you're expected to squash yourself into somebody else's plan. This is not what Beyond Chocolate is. Beyond Chocolate is a toolbox, if you like, of 10 different principles, and you can pick and choose from those and put them together in a way that works for you. And some are going to be applicable to just about everybody, and others, some people are going to find them useful and some not, but it's entirely about using what works for you. So, but there are some things, for example, one of the principles is eat when you're hungry, which doesn't mean don't ever eat. Like if you're at a birthday party and you want that piece of cake and you're not really physically hungry, you don't have to go, no, you don't. But the idea is that you eat from physical hunger as often as possible. And then you stop when you're satisfied as often as possible. You know, simple things like that, which when you actually put them into your life can make a huge difference, because we tend to eat to a schedule, we tend to eat to, oh, it's lunchtime, I'm going to eat, and we don't actually ask ourselves, am I hungry?
No, and it's interesting actually when you unravel that a bit further. If you look at a baby doesn't eat to a schedule, does it? You know, a baby eats and cries for food because the baby is hungry, because they know. And the same goes for animals. You watch animals. I have chickens, for example. They don't go and gorge on the chicken feed because it's there. They eat until they've had enough, and then off they pootle, and then they come back. And there's a lot to be said for all of us learning to get back to that, isn't there?
Absolutely. And to tune into you know, what are the drivers for any overeating we're doing? You know, do we eat when we're angry? Do we eat when we're sad? And what else and the thing is, it works. Overeating as a strategy works in the sense that it can be comforting, and it can fill that gap, and it can help us zone out and not feel the feelings, but obviously it can have side effects that people may not want. And so once you've identified it, then you have a choice. You know, do I want to eat that, or is there something else I can do which would be more helpful for me?
And I suppose for women in this phase of life and going through perimenopause, we've got the hormonal imbalances, but then also for a lot of women in their late 30s, 40s, early 50s, there are the teenage children, there's the stressful job, there's the elderly parents. So it's not a huge surprise, really, to see weight gain, even if you take everything else aside, you know, because actually reaching for convenience food or something that's quick on the go, I guess, is all going to add, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, while there's no food, I mean, convenience food is great, you know, if that's going to be helpful for you. There's no food that's sort of good or bad. And I think taking the morality out of eating is a major thing. But also, like you say, women are so busy. We're often the primary carers, and now we're working as well. And, you know, everything, unfortunately, sort of the fact that women also work now similarly to men doesn't mean we've lost the sort of primary role at home in most cases. So we're quite overloaded. And also we're saying yes, yes, yes to everyone else's wants, and no, no, no to ourselves. And the quickest and easiest way way to say yes to ourselves is often like a quick chocolate biscuit here or something there, and it doesn't affect anyone else. We go off and have a snack and it sort of gives you a little boost, but that's similarly overeating.
Absolutely. Yes, it's a big one to unravel, isn't it? So there's one thing we haven't yet covered off is the kind of the fact, I guess, that ultimately long-term dieting, for want of a better word, and restricting doesn't really work. I know you have lots of stats on this, and
I do. I think the fundamental issue is that, you know, as people, we're quite rebellious, really. And if someone says to you, I mean, for example, they say to you the classic, don't think of a pink elephant, you're going to think of a pink elephant, aren't you? So as soon as you start dieting, people tend to think more about food. It's more in your head. The plain fact is that restriction of any type is the prime cause of binging. So if you want to start binging, start restricting, start cutting out food groups, start saying I'm not having any chocolate. I mean, everyone I think has been on a diet where, or most people have been on a diet where they've, you know, gone to somewhere and been weighed, and then the night after weighing they have a big blowout because they've got another week, and that teaches you to restrict and binge and create that pattern in your life. We're not meant to be like that. The way we work best as humans is to listen to our bodies and give the nutrition it needs to live the lives we live.
And just, I did quickly mention stats there, correct me on this one. Am I right in thinking that long term, so beyond something like 2 years, only 3% of dieters keep the weight off, or something crazy like that? Is that true?
That's correct. I think 97% of dieters over 5 years will regain the weight they've lost, many of them plus some. Because what it does, I think we all have a set point which our body tries to get back to, set point of weight, and every time that we diet, and our bodies are very clever, they try and hold on, they don't want to lose weight, so our set point goes higher. That's what happens. So you can reset it. It's not that, you know, you're doomed. If you've done 20 diets, you know, you're not doomed. But what it takes is an extended period of letting your body know it can trust you again, that it's not going to be feast and famine.
And I guess that's key, isn't it? Absolutely regaining your body's trust that food will happen when your body needs food, and restriction won't happen when your body needs food. And that's quite big.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned babies earlier on and how that they're naturally intuitive eaters. But if you look at children who are not given food, and what it does to their development, or they're not given affection or not comforted, they don't have that trust. And it really messes with their development. So this is us throughout our lives. You know, our bodies need to trust that it will get what it needs, and then it can use the energy it's got rather than holding on to it.
Which makes perfect sense, doesn't it, really? And I'm just going to ask one last question. I'm just going to put a word out there to you and see what your reaction is. Willpower.
Willpower. It's a big word, isn't it? You know, people criticize themselves but for not having enough willpower to stick to it. And that's the way we blame ourselves when diets sort of quote unquote go wrong. And in fact, if you think of willpower as sort of holding your breath, you can only do it for so long, and then you have to take a massive gulp of air, don't you? So willpower, I think, is a really bad way to go. If the way that you are eating and nourishing yourself is something that you are happy to do for the rest of your life, and it works for you, that's great. And for that 3% of the population we talked about, they might be perfectly happy to do whatever diet plan they're on in perpetuity. And that's great. If that works for them, I would never criticize it. But for the majority, the vast majority, it's not going to work. And we're going to go, oh, it's Christmas. Oh, it's Easter. Oh, it's somebody's birthday. And it's sort of this up and down thing, which is actually really damaging for us psychologically and physically. So no to the willpower.
No to the willpower. Excellent. For somebody watching this, what would you suggest? Can people work directly with you, or would you suggest they look at Beyond Chocolate, or would you suggest they find an equivalent of you near them? What's the best route forward for somebody?
Well, any and all of those. Beyond Chocolate is on Facebook. You can search Beyond Chocolate on Facebook, and also the website is www.beyondchocolate.co.uk. They're very welcome to contact me, and I work in person in Devon, but I also work on Skype and online in various ways. I think if they are looking for counselling or therapy in that area, it's really good to check out and ask some questions beforehand, because obviously different counsellors, different therapists will have different dietary approaches. And if you want a non-diet approach, body positive approach, or at least body neutral approach, then you probably need to check that out beforehand. But there are certainly some good people out there.
So when I publish this video in the Facebook group, would you be okay to just answer any questions that anybody has? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Brilliant. And I will link to your website at the end of the video as well. So thank you ever so much, Carys. That's really, really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.